A devastating loss of life. Two earthquakes, both stronger than magnitude 7. They shook parts of Turkey and parts of Syria.
More than 20,000 people are dead, tens of thousands without a home tonight. Rescue crews are battling the clock, digging through that rubble, looking for any signs of life 4 days after the quake.
We dig into the area's earthquake history and what you can do to help. But we're going to start with the latest from southern Turkey with Chris Livesay.
It's been 3 days. The earthquake killed Abdullahi Mwani's wife and buried him alive. 72 hours fending off exposure, hypothermia, and unimaginable grief. The unseasonable cold, as much as 15 degrees lower than normal, has made the catastrophe even more lethal, says the World Health Organization.
We've got a lot of people who have survived now out in the open in worsening and horrific conditions. We've got major disruption to fuel, electricity supplies, communication supplies, the basics of life. We are in real danger of seeing a secondary disaster which may cause harm to more people than the initial disaster.
International relief is pouring in. Help that cannot come quickly enough. My mother, father, and brother are under the rubble, Selena Kamin cries. There's been no sound from them for days. None.
And the cold isn't making it more difficult just for people trapped beneath the rubble. It's also making it difficult for those trying to rescue them, many of whom are victims themselves who have just lost their homes and are now using their bare hands oftentimes to look for people who might still be beneath these crumbled homes, bit by bit, bucket by bucket. Chris Livesay, CBS News, Southern Turkey.
The first earthquake was massive by itself, a 7.8 magnitude. It shook Turkey and Syria early Monday. It's generated dozens of aftershocks too, including a 7.5 magnitude earthquake. We talked with an NC State professor who studies the seafloor and seismology.
These happened on a part of Turkey where it's not unexpected we'd have large earthquakes. Most people probably know the kind of the outer shell of the earth is in these rigid blocks that we call plates. And Turkey is sort of a little bit of a plate there that's getting shoved out to the west. You know from the geologic record that there have been large earthquakes there in the past. The other thing, the really important thing to keep in mind is we tend to think about earthquakes and you see them on a map or the news, maybe there's a dot or a star there. That's where the earthquake happened. A big earthquake like this goes on for a minute and it might propagate out laterally up to like 100 miles or something like that. Right, so this is a long area where we've had intense ground shaking all along this fault zone. And so that's part of the story with the damage too, is that it's not just a point that's radiating energy out, it's really this long zone that's ripping open. People can feel fairly small earthquakes. You know, we have earthquakes that are sort of magnitude 2, 3. They're not uncommon here in North Carolina and the western part of the state or even in the Piedmont. And so we had a series of them below Winston-Salem a few years ago, and they were, mid-magnitude 2s. People felt them, but didn't cause any damage. Didn't really disrupt life. We had the earthquake in Sparta a couple of years ago. It was like a 5.1. It actually was very unusual in that for 5.1, in that it actually kind of broke through the surface. So we're in a very kind of stable place. The crust or the earth is always under a little bit of stress, so we get a little bit of seismicity. But in a place like Turkey, the entire block of Turkey is being shoved out to the west. It's sort of trying to escape.
Help for Turkey and Syria is coming from all around the world, including right here in the U.S. 2 search and rescue teams from the U.S. are already on the way.
We also have a couple of Blackhawks to see the assets they have, the machinery, to cut through concrete and rebar, and the dogs as well to try to find those survivors still there. So it's just, when we respond, we do it well.
North Carolina-based organization Samaritan's Purse is also deploying crews to Syria. They say they're sending 75 people in emergency field hospitals to Turkey. It will have 52 beds and 2 emergency operating rooms.
Seeing tragedies like this, your heart just aches. You really want to help. But Matt Gregory warns, don't let your kindness make you vulnerable to a scam.
I wish we didn't have to talk about this, but unfortunately, some people use your generosity to make money. So we verified a few quick ways to avoid disaster donation scams.
To find out how to avoid those scams, we went to the Better Business Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission's fact sheets on donations. First, the BBB says do a little research on the charity you choose. You can go to give.org to find the BBB's trusted charities. Another big one, the Better Business Bureau says be skeptical of crowdfunding campaigns. Campaigns set up on sites like GoFundMe.com do very little vetting of the people who set up the campaigns. The BBB also says give money rather than goods. It helps faster and offers charities flexibility. And to add to that, be wary of any charity promising 100% help to victims and families. Every organization has some overhead. And finally, when you do find somewhere to donate, the FTC reminds you to designate the disaster relief you want your money to help. Otherwise, the money could just go to a general fund. Follow these pointers and you have a better chance of your money going where it's needed.
One final point. After you donate, check to see the money went where it was supposed to go. Transparent organizations will post on their websites, but others, you may have to wait until they release audited financial statements to find out.
Give.org already has a long list of safe charities to help out the victims of the earthquake. You'll be able to find that full list on WFMYnews2.com later this evening.
Well, Del Bonesteel says earthquakes, the magnitude of those that struck Turkey, are not really uncommon. In fact, we see about 10 a year all across the world.
And when one happens, they are able to use those earthquakes to help predict what's coming next.
We have a model for how both of these earthquakes slipped, and we can calculate what that's going to do to nearby fault. There's an area that hasn't slipped in a long time that's now been loaded by the combination of these two earthquakes. There's sort of a little gap there where it hasn't slipped in a while, and we know that these recent earthquakes have increased the likelihood of failure on that. So that's an area that might not slip tomorrow, but it's an area where we would expect perhaps that we've sped up the time to the next earthquake.
Well, Bonesteel says the only thing people really can do is prepare.
WFMY News 2 at 6 is next.